Hello and welcome to the Swim Brief. I am Chris DeSantis. As promised, I am joined once again by the Executive Director of Golf Swimming, Julie Bachman. Julie, how are you?
Great, buddy. How are you doing?
You're inside today.
Yeah, well, I think you guys were getting tired of all the extraneous pig noises, so I wanted to make sure we kept
I think the pig noises are what differentiates this podcast from. I mean, does Brett Hawk have pigs in the background? I don't think so. Step up your game, Hawk.
Good point.
Okay. You think you're interviewing all these big shots, but do any of them have pet pigs? I don't think so. And the Aquatic Director for the Minnetonka School District and
former board member of USA
Swimming. Board member of USA Swimming. All around cantankerous man, John Bradley. How are you, John?
Very cantankerous.
He's
more cantankerous than usual today.
We've asked him to turn the cantankerous level up to 11 today, specifically. Yes. No, I'm going to let John introduce most of our topic for today, but the idea here is we're going to try to do a much better version of that 5-minute listicle. You might see Olivier Power-Leroy write on Swim, where he goes, the 5 things you need to do to reduce stress as a swim coach. We're going to actually try to be a little bit more prescriptive in some of that stuff, but it's not going to be also complete. Part of the beauty of this format is it can be an ongoing conversation, and the plan here is just to sort of keep talking until we don't feel like we have anything important left to say. And just from the offline conversation I have with these two, I think we have a lot of backlog of important things to talk about. So I don't anticipate we're going to get to that place where it's like, oh, well, I guess we solved all the world's problems very soon. But JB, you want to get a little bit more into the specifics of what we're discussing today?
Yeah. So what we'd like to talk about, I think, over the next few weeks is just different stressors in coaching. Things like identifying issues, maybe personally and professionally, that create stress in the day, a week, a month of a swim coach's life, and how to handle some of those things. Efficiency and effectiveness. What kind of steps can you take which makes your life easier, and laying a foundation to be more efficient and effective in your coaching career. This concept of streamlining, we all know how beneficial a streamline is for a kid in the water. Are there ways that you can streamline your day so that you get more out of it and you have time for yourself?
Yeah.
And then today, we're not really trying to overload anybody. We just want to talk about simplification and just some things that you can control that hopefully make your life a lot easier. And these are, again, just real simple things that you can do, or at least consider, to move from a reactionary aspect to a proactive aspect and try to get some control back.
Yeah, I think that's something we discussed last time too. I mean, I feel coaches often get stuck being firemen, and they're just running around, as you say, reactive. They're running around, they're putting out fires, and they get caught in a vicious cycle because being in constant fireman mode, it does make it hard to get yourself organized around being proactive, when unfortunately a lot of the stuff for being proactive is what will help you long term to not be running around like a fireman putting out. So all right.
Can I add to that a little bit?
Yeah, please do. And then I'll introduce the first topic. Yeah.
Yeah. Throw a few more. Just throw a couple more metaphors at everybody.
Please.
The reason metaphors exist is because, in most cases, it's actually like a legitimate thing. And okay, this is going to sound really weird, but this is coming from my past life as a farmer. I used to raise cattle. And I know this is out there, man.
Now I'm interested. We could just do a whole cattle podcast.
But the key, what'd you say? I missed you.
I said, now I'm really interested.
Okay.
I'm hanging on every word about cattle. Here we go.
Okay. So I think that we get caught up, and I'm not just talking about coaches, but it's very hard to progress in your life in any way when you're just literally like have so much on top of you and so much going on that you don't have a good perspective on things, right? And the one thing, my dogs are driving, guys, stop it. The one thing that I used to be amazed at when I would watch my herd of cattle, I had 50 cows, okay, is that when the shit was going down, they headed for the hills, man, okay, really fast. And they ran about 2,000 yards away. They would stop and they would turn around and evaluate it. They wouldn't keep going. It's not like they were giving up on anything. It wasn't like they were abandoning ship, but they knew they had to get away from whatever was going on in order to effectively figure it out and take the next step.
Yep.
And I know that kind of sounds crazy, but it's that whole concept of 10,000, you got to get up to 10,000 feet and look down on a problem. I don't think we always give ourselves the power to do that. And we need to do that in order to be better at anything we do in life, whether it's personal or professional. You got to get away from it. And I don't see, I think this is one of the endemic problems in our profession. Coaches don't have the confidence. It's not even confidence. They don't give themselves or allow themselves the time to get away to actually start dealing with things that are going on either with themselves, their club, their athletes. And it's almost like they look at it as a weakness, like, oh, I don't have time for that. It's like, no, you got to make time for it. Like that's part of being better. So anyway, I wanted to throw that metaphor out at everybody. And I think that's part of what these next few things we're going to talk about are about. It's like, continue to think about this stuff, but really you got to kind of get away a little bit and to reflect back on what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. Were they dairy cattle? Or
no, it was cow calf. So it was beef cattle.
Beef. Wow.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah.
I love beef. Okay. Let's talk about this first topic. We've got 4 to go through. And one of them, we sort of, in our last podcast, we already started this conversation. So we're just sort of continuing it. But I have here the idea of embracing customer service in everything that you do. So when you say embrace customer service, what do you mean by that, Julie?
So this, by the way, is like my favorite topic because
okay, here we go. We're in the wheelhouse.
When I kind of walked into the swimming business world, the one thing that I immediately noticed is that no one really talked about anything we were doing in business terms. And that's okay. It's a sport. We're coaching. There's occasionally this reluctance to say, but this is really a business. And I understand that, but the reality of it is there is a business side to this. And one of the, you think about your interaction with companies, products, services in your daily life. What is one thing that is the most aggravating possible thing that can happen to you? It's when you go and interact with the company and the customer service is bad. And usually it has everything to do with just having this initial immediate interaction, and it's just not a pleasant one. And it's a very easy thing for a company, let's just say a swim club. This would be a very easy thing for a swim club and for the staff and coaches on the club to start intentionally talking about amongst themselves, and then externally, acting on a daily basis. And, it kind of begs the question, like, who are the customers? And when you take care of your customers and your customers are happy, it really does alleviate a lot of problems, because the first thing that happens is that when something goes wrong or something's not as usual, a customer who is happy and who has had a good experience is going to give you the benefit of the doubt. They're not going to automatically jump to conclusions or be pissed off or attack. They're going to be more, they're on your team. They want to help you solve the problem or be part of the solution. Yeah. So who are the customers? And I think, this is, I think, kind of a little bit for discussion, but I think the number one customer is the parent.
Yes.
And we tend to look at that parent as something that needs to be dealt with. That's kind of an attitude versus, hey, this is my customer. I can't wait to have a positive interaction with this person.
Yeah.
And those interactions can be, they can be, passive, like an email or a social media post, or they can be like, hey, a wave or a handshake, or I guess we don't do that anymore, an elbow bump, direct eye contact, taking time to actually set aside to actually spend time with those customers. And the teams in my LSC that I would say are top successful clubs, whatever, there's what does successful mean? That's a whole nother conversation.
Sure.
They do this really, really well. Their parents know what's going on. Their parents know what to expect. And it's not some great big crystal ball on how to figure it out. I just see very strong communication. And I think that's something that if a coach and the staff can sit down and just in general talk about this, it definitely alleviates a lot of potential issues.
Yeah. So I was just thinking as you're talking, just thinking, of course I want to extrapolate to maybe my own situation as a coach. I think this is definitely some of the stuff you're talking about has really been challenged, obviously, by the circumstances of the last year. Like one of the weirdest things, I've started with a new team. Now we're coming up on a year being there. I have not seen probably even a majority of the parents of the kids that I coach face to face. Because of, for a long part of this year, they were not even allowed to come into the building. We were coaching, right? So the kids came in fully dressed, swam their laps, and then they got out of the building, got into cars and left. There were no spectators at the swim meets. Very different for me because if I go all the way back to my time at Denmark, this kind of stuff was really natural, almost a little too natural because we had no spectator areas at swim meet. So if a parent came to a swim meet, they were standing right next to me while I was watching their kids swim. There was no avoiding any kind of interaction. And it was sort of built in naturally. So what would you say, when you're dealing with some of all these restrictions, like it sounds good in principle, but if you were to recommend to me in the group that I coach, that I, or sort of make a recommendation for me to get some of that sort of important face time with some of the customers.
Yeah,
I think you're dead right on that, by the way.
Yeah, I don't think customer service is FaceTime all the time. It's not about that. It's also about, you can create FaceTime. Over the course of the pandemic, I've heard of many Zoom, everybody's Zoomed to death, but group meetings on Zoom with the parents, team meetings on Zoom, where everybody did talk about, oh, it's so good to see you. And I think, but herein lies the opportunity in that we've recognized that we actually miss some of that interaction. And now have parents and athletes kind of sitting there with their, open eyes and hands open, like, okay, we're getting back to normal. Like, what's next? Fill that up with all sorts of awesome shit. Okay. Like whether it's a text or a phone call or an email or a meeting or whatever, where, you're talking about, your club culture, what you plan on working on, what are the next steps, reflect on the stories that have come out of this pandemic are absolutely amazing. Look, we've survived. These businesses, these swim club businesses have survived a really tough time. We weren't allowed to do the stuff that's actually why we're in business, and we're still in business.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to celebrate. And the fact that we're still here and we have parents that are still involved and families that are still involved also speaks to the fact that you've been doing excellent customer service all along. It's just that I really feel like this is just one of those things that is it's easy to do, but it's also easy not to. You can assume, assume that somebody knows something, or assume people know that I appreciate them. Or, it's almost like the same, in your personal life. It's like, I make a point of telling my kid as often as I can, I love you. I intentionally do that.
Right.
And customer service is the same thing. You have to intentionally, okay, your swim parents, find out a way as much as possible without being over the top, I guess, but
Right.
over the top isn't always bad, but how can I let them know how much I appreciate them?
Yeah.
And I think it's important. And JB, talk about what you said to me earlier today, which I think is awesome. The 90% quote, I love that.
So one of the things I think that people make a big mistake on is I think they get hung up on this performance side of things and think that the only thing that drives people to your team is performance, or the only thing that's fulfilling for people who are involved in a swim club is the performance of their kid. And I don't disagree that that's a big part of why people do this sport. It's about seeing things happen, you put in the time, so on and so forth. But I think if you were to flip it a little bit and you were to say, okay, what if 90% of the people are here because they're getting good customer service, they're appreciating what's going on, they like being a part of this community, and you reevaluated how you did things that way and reemphasize things. So maybe instead of worrying so much about where you're going to stay for junior nationals, or what meets you're going to go to for your top tier kids, what if you put some of that energy into how can I communicate clearly with people so they understand what's going on? How can I elevate our communications game so that people are better? How can I make sure that what's being put on the website is accurate, and that my Facebook page is in line with what it needs to be?
Yeah.
And if you did those things, I think you'd be much happier. I mean, there in Rochester where I go out to dinner probably, I don't know, not as much anymore. I'm on a big diet, but I would go to probably 3 or 4 nights a week out for dinner. And I tend to go to the same places because I know the service is good.
Yep.
And there is nothing that pisses me off more at a meal than bad service. And and I'm not even a demanding customer. I just appreciate it when stuff comes out fast, somebody comes by and checks, they see how you're doing, and then they have your bill ready when you're done.
Yep.
Beautiful. And I go to those places where I know the experience is good. And I tell people that I know to go to those places because I know their experience will be good.
Yep.
And the quality of the food, that depends on who you're talking to. But I think a lot of people agree that good service is a certain way. And when you're talking about parents who communicate and network with each other at school, at church, at home, over the internet, whatever they do, they're talking to other people who have these shared experiences. And someone says, hey, what sports does your kid play? Are they going to say, oh man, I love our swim club. We have the best swimmers in the state. Nobody cares. What they're going to say is, yeah, this is awesome. I pay my money. I always know what's going on. I can sync my calendar on the phone. My kids really like the coaches. Everything works really well. I'm willing to bet you that they don't talk about performance. Now, there's probably 2% of the parents out there who are saying, oh, you should come and swim with us because our kids are the best. By and large, that's not how it goes. People say, I like the experience for my kid, and they're getting something out of it. Yep. And I think that's where people should take a look at what's really paying the bills and build from there versus the other way.
Yep. Yeah. I think a couple of things that I know have worked really well for me has been, I do coach a massive group. I mean, I have, right now I got almost 50 kids registered for next year. So even just in the course of a 90-minute practice, making sure that every kid knows that I have noted that they're at practice. Like I see them, hey, how are you? Or say one thing or another that just sort of makes some sort of connection. And then I have found too, and this is something sort of a holdover positive psychology practice. But gratitude is a great stress reliever for me. And so something that even when I have to have communication with maybe a broad group of parents and I'm like, hey, here's what's going on in practice. And we're trying to work on this. We're trying to work on that. I try to include at the end, just like, and by the way, thank you for letting me coach your kid, because as a parent, like I know it takes a lot to sign your kid up for something and put your kid in a position where another adult is going to spend this much time with them. It's a big decision. It's an important decision. It's something that really matters to you. And I always get really, really nice communication back when I include that on the end. And it's like kind of one of those things where you can just end up taking it for granted that like these people are coming in or not. When in reality, this is, of course it's important to you, but it's really important to them on the other end as well. You're doing something with the most precious people in their entire lives. And they're putting a lot of faith and trust in you that you're going to do something really good for them. Okay. Let's talk a bit about delegation of tasks. I think this is a really big topic, especially among, people that are head coaches. Probably feels if they've been told many times, like, oh, you need to delegate more, or if you're in that fireman mode, like go ahead and find ways to get other people. We talked a little bit last time about how to even use sort of non-coaching resources to get some of this stuff done. But John, talk a little bit more about how very specifically delegation can be a stress reducer for coaches.
Sure. So I think the first thing you have to do is you have to take a quick assessment of your abilities as a head coach. And you can break this out to, we'll use head coaches as an example.
Sure.
So one of the things that you need to look at is, are you good at delegating? Because if you're bad at it, then you need to talk about why you're bad at it. Okay. And one of the things I've noticed is that people who are bad delegators, sometimes they just want to do everything themselves. Yeah. But sometimes I think it also is this thing where they feel if they're not doing it all themselves, that it's not going to get done, or they're going to be perceived as not being knowledgeable or whatever. And yep. I think the first thing you've got to do when you're in that mode is to say, okay, what am I good at? And stay in your lane. So if you're really good at being that person who can talk to people and glad hand people, and you can make that work within your daily structure and fit it into a schedule, by all means do it. And if on the flip side, you're really bad at social media, don't try to do the social media. Find somebody who you can work with and delegate the tasks to them, and then schedule regular meetings with that person where you can use your God-given ability to communicate with people and talk to them about what you're seeing.
I'm only smiling, John, because I'm in charge of social media, and my boss is probably listening to this right now, and he's like, Chris needs to do a better job on social media. I know he knows that social media is not one of his strengths, and I'm not sure it's one of mine either, but it's my job here at Jersey Wahoo. So I'm feeling a bit self-conscious as you make this point.
Well, but this is a great example of what I'm talking about. Is so your boss has delegated this task to you.
Yeah.
Did your boss take the time to figure out if it's something that you're good at? And I think having that talent identification piece is part of it.
But what if we don't have anybody that's good at it? And
well, that's just it. I'm willing to bet you that the reason it was delegated to you is because you're competent, because you've shown that you can do other tasks. But do you really understand what it is you're trying to do? And would you be better served by reaching out to your parent community and saying, hey, I need a social media coordinator. Does anybody do this at work? And can you give us some quick tips or maybe get us involved? And boom, you'll have 20 people. The other thing you can do, talk to your athletes. I mean, again, we're kind of going into the weeds about social media.
Sure.
Kids understand how to do it better than anybody. So yeah. If you're not talking to them, it's not going to.
Our social media feed is so much better when we're at a swim meet and we allow some kid to sort of take over
Oh,
for
yeah.
the day while we're at the meet. Yeah, it's
Totally.
incredibly
But,
better.
I think you take it away from social media and look at things like meet entries. What's your team's policy on meet entries? Who coordinates all that? If the head coach is spinning their wheels doing an hour of meet entries a week or something like that, does that need to be reevaluated? Is there another person who can take that task on? And, just for that person in authority to look at, okay, what's taking up my time and what can I move into another piece?
Yeah.
That kind of dovetails into the next point is what's the most important thing for you to dedicate time to? And I think that one of the things that we don't do enough as coaches is, okay, what's the why of what we're doing? And okay, so we're here to coach, we do this. Okay, so once you have your coaching strategy, and then whatever it is you have to do to put yourself in a competent place so you can do a good job with that coaching, then what? So what's next? And
Yeah.
that's where it gets all mixed up. Is it really important for you to come into the office and look at everyone else's website around you, all your competitors' websites, and say, oh, we've got to do this better, we've got to do this better, probably not. Is it really important for you to go in and look at meet results from 2 years ago to see where somebody was and this and that? Probably not. Is it worth your time to work through your emails and make sure that you're responding to people within 24 hours and getting them answers? Yes, that's probably important. I would argue that's the most important thing you can do. And that ties into Julie's piece a little earlier about communicating. It's staying in the moment and making sure that you've exhausted what needs to be done in the moment. And then you can move forward. And once you get a handle on that, then you can really start shifting into proactive piece. When you talk about this delegation thing as well, why do you have to do all of these things to be proactive? Or is it more effective for you to, have maybe 2 or 3 people you're delegating tasks to, and then schedule a time once a week where you can say, hey, where are we at with this? Hey, where are we at with this? And if somebody isn't getting the job done, acting on it immediately, not just saying, oh, well, let me know next week. Just saying, hey, do you need help? And then if in a couple of days you don't see anything, then you have to engage. And by doing it that way and building out some more time for yourself by delegating, if you have to do that thing, then you have the time to get in and do it. Does that make sense? Kind of building in that buffer for yourself where even if you have to do it, at least you don't have to do 4 things that maybe you wouldn't have delegated before.
Right.
I think that helps.
Yeah.
So-
But JB, it's also like intentionally making yourself just sit down and think about this stuff, allowing just the fact that, okay, what is it that I could delegate here? What is it that's important to me? Just continuing to remember, like, what is that North Star of your coaching life, so to speak, and making sure that all the things that you're doing point to the star. Like, you gave a very good example of something that doesn't point to the star, which is, oh, I'm surfing on the internet looking at another team's website, or, shopping on Amazon, during a time where I could actually be getting something done for the swim team. I think I always, and again, this is another metaphor cliche, but this whole concept of having that why, which is also, I call it the North Star, is what am I doing today? Does it hit that target? And if it doesn't, I'm going to put it aside. It doesn't mean that I won't do it at some point, but it's not, the things that the North Star things, if you don't get those things done, if you're not effectively dealing with those on a daily basis, that causes stress. If you're on Amazon and you forget to go to Amazon, does not cause stress. It's right. Just forcing yourself at certain, I guess it's more like having the discipline, right? The discipline to stick to that, I think, is really important. And I mean, I am oh, there's a squirrel. There's a, oh, look at that. The pig's in the backyard. I can get distracted like nobody's business, but this is something that really helps me, is just, where's the star, Julie? It's like, that's not, do that later. I think that's really important.
Well, whatever it is that you're trying to do, whatever it is that you're trying to work towards. One of the things that we've talked about with my high school coaching staff is this idea that discipline is a greater thing to have than motivation.
Yeah.
You can walk into, your office and be motivated that you're going to, shock the world today and whatever. But if you don't have the discipline to be there every day and have good days and bad days, it's not helping you. And I think that as coaches, the ones who tend to be disciplined with what they do and not rigid, but understand that these are the things that have to be done each day for me to be successful, are the ones who are going to do very well. Motivation isn't the same thing. Being motivated just means that you're making yourself feel better about what you're doing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Or it gets you to that place. But you have to have the discipline to do it.
Yeah. And I think, one of my own personal positive psychology revelations of the last year is that being positive takes organization. It's negativity comes naturally to all of us, right? It's very easy to start, swirling around the toilet bowl. We don't need to work at that. Like, we can have like a lot of stressful sort of stuff come up, and it's very easy to lapse into that. It actually, you have to be kind of organized and disciplined and structured in order to keep a optimistic, a positive frame, however you want to put it, looking forward. Because if you don't organize around it, that stuff falls apart really easily on you. And
but don't you guys think this is something, like, to your point, Chris, I don't mean to interrupt you, but this is something you guys can do as a staff?
Yep.
Holding each other accountable to being positive, to working on your individual important tasks every day and not getting distracted, and supporting each other, and hey, how's that going? And some teams are probably set up in a way that works better than others, but I do think it all goes back to this intentionality and discipline, and then everybody buying into it as a staff, and it becomes a real part of the culture of the team. And that has all sorts of unexpected, awesome things that result, I think.
Yeah.
And to close out kind of this delegation piece a little bit is, people need to understand that delegating tasks isn't just saying you do this and forgetting about it, and then getting angry if somebody doesn't do something.
Right.
Delegation is giving someone a task to complete, following up and making sure the task is being completed the way you want it, mentoring the person to make sure that they're doing the task the way you want it, and maybe they're getting something out of it. And then at the end, showing some gratitude that they did the task and they did a good job with it, and moving on to the next task.
Right.
If you're just forgetting about it, that's not doing anything. There's no intentionality. The only intentionality there is the intentionality of you shirking your responsibility of following it through and doing it the right way. It's a goal setting piece. You need to make sure that you do that. And again, that's the discipline piece of making sure you do it the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Because I know we've got a time limit coming up relatively soon, and we got a little bit more to discuss. I want to talk a little bit more specifically, Julie, you had on here team communications. And again, I think there's something in here about proactivity, and we got into it a little bit earlier with some of the social media stuff and some of that stuff around embracing customer service. But talk a little bit more specifically about team communications, and how you can, because if I remember all the way back, what you can control in team communications to make your life a lot easier.
So, this is a huge topic unto itself, and I think we'll be spending a lot of time on this over the next few weeks. But I think focusing today just on the immediate controllables of this is literally almost like customer service. It's like embracing the concept that you are going to communicate, and really thinking about what that means, because there are a ton of ways to do this. And the good thing is that there's a lot of ways to effectively and easily communicate for the club, the team, the coach, et cetera. But the negative of that is that there's also a ton of ways to communicate for parents and your customers to communicate if you're not doing it. And what happens is if a club, a coach, a set of coaches, a staff, if you don't make the decision to control the team communication, somebody else is going to do it. You're going to create a vacuum. And within that vacuum, because everybody wants knowledge, everybody wants to know what's going on. If you don't control the messaging, if you don't control it, I guarantee you there's going to be a set of parents, probably not the parents that you want to have controlling the communication and messaging, who will step in and take that over. And all of a sudden, parents will be viewed as the experts and the ones that know everything, and everybody will be looking to them versus looking at the coaching staff. And I see this happen. 80% of our teams have this problem. And I think, I'll get a phone call from a coach about a parent, and it's like, okay, let's work through this. Every single time it comes back to the fact that the team just does not have a very good communication strategy. The parents don't know what's going on. They don't know what's to expect, which is the biggest thing, what to expect. So I'm kind of digressing a little. And I mean, I think this shows the breadth of this topic and all that we can talk about. But I think first and foremost, immediately to really think about what is it that you are currently doing to communicate to your customers and analyzing the effectiveness of it. If you're getting a lot of questions back that frustrate you, that's your fault. It's not the parent's fault. If the parent is asking, I don't understand this, or, I kind of heard this, but I don't know that much about it. It is easy to get frustrated. But if you look at yourself and say, wait a second, I'm obviously not meeting my parents where they are. And what that means is the parents are getting their communication someplace. You have to figure out where that is, and you need to be there. So it could be Facebook, it could be Instagram, it could be email, it could be website, it could be a combination of all those things, but you need to figure that out. And it's almost like a puzzle. And this is something in my role as executive director at our LSC, I do try to communicate effectively, and I communicate on every single platform. I still miss people. And when I miss people, I actually will pick up the phone and call them. And it is frustrating. But if you truly want everyone to know what's going on, it is a very intentional, very proactive part of your business. And there really is nothing more important. And, we can talk about what needs to be communicated. I think that's a larger conversation. But this whole idea of proactive versus passive communication, I think, is also important. If you put it on your website, that doesn't count. It doesn't, because generally we don't wake up every day and say,
go check the website.
I wonder if Chris put something on the website. I'm going to go check. I guarantee
that's a bygone era, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. So the website, think of the website as your information vault. Yeah. You should have everything that about your team, whether it's the calendar, everything is there. But how do you get your parents to go look at what you want them to look at? And that's where it's, Facebook, putting a link on Facebook for somebody to check, email, making sure there's links. Like, links are very important. That hot links, not just a link, like click here. And we can have a session on this where we actually teach people how to do that.
Yeah.
Simplified messaging. How many times do you get an email from somebody that has like no paragraph or punctuation? And again, this is identifying, is this a strength of mine or not? If it's not, now it can be learned. This is something that if you are interested in understanding how to effectively communicate via email or even social media, this can be learned. If you don't want to, that's also fine. Great thing to delegate. There's people that really love to do this. I'll be the first one to go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. My boss, Paul, didn't reach out to you and ask you to have this intervention with me. This is just such a topic that you guys have or my wife or anything. She wasn't like, could you maybe talk to Chris about communicating a little bit
Yeah.
better? That never
Yeah.
happened, right? I
This
just want
is-
to check in the middle
Yeah,
of this.
we're just
Okay.
we're circling the drain.
Okay.
Circling the drain. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You're on to me. You busted me.
Okay. I can
No,
take
but-
it.
but-
No, this is important for me to hear. It's good. It's good. Keep going.
Yeah, but you saying that is just this is not even just about your club, right? It's about it's if you're not communicating effectively to your club, there's about a 9,000% chance that you're also not effectively communicating to anybody. And so this is a huge area where you can constantly get better. And we're coaches, you guys are coaches. We're constantly talking and preaching to our athletes about how do you improve, how do you progress, how do you get better. Here's an example of a place where you can practice what you preach. And again, I think this is an area we need to get deeper into at some point, and I think we really can help. But I just think today is not necessarily the day. I think if there is really a takeaway to this, it's intentionally evaluate your communication strategy, and you should have one.
Have
If
a
you don't-
strategy first.
Yeah,
first.
exactly.
Then
if
evaluate it.
Yeah, if you don't have one, and I mean, I love this stuff. I will help anybody. If there's anybody who wants to talk further about this or says, Julie, like, I literally just don't know how to do this, I need help, I would love to help anybody. So there's other people in our swim space that are actually good at this too. So I think it's also, if it's something you want to get better at, there's people that can help you. But again, I think a lot of what we're talking about today is just like intentionally sitting back, thinking about these things that we're talking about, and just saying, yes, I am going to embrace customer service. Yes, I am going to have the strength and willingness to delegate tasks. And you know what? I am going to communicate, for God's sake. That's really what the point of this today, I think, is about, is not even necessarily getting into the weeds of it, and actually, because this is a bigger picture thing, but it's like actually really starting to think about these things. And JV's got one more for us too.
Yeah. So I should look in the mirror and say, I'm good enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. Then I launch my communication strategy.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last thing we want to talk about here to get in is effective use of office time. And I'm sitting in my office recording this right now. And one of my little projects for the summer too is to make a more effective office space for us. As you can see, it's not the most.
Yeah, I don't know
glamorous.
what's going on back there.
There's a lot of electronics on tables. So that's a little project. Yeah.
That's a -6 room raider space right there.
Yeah. We don't. I've heard suggestions that maybe get a backdrop here, Chris, so that we don't have to look at your disorganized closets when you're doing this. But what is, because I think this is an important topic. Coaches, obviously, it comes naturally to them. The practice time, show up, to the practice time, have a practice ready to go, hopefully, and how to make best use of that time. But what about that dry side part of it? Obviously, if you're working in this full time, you're going to have some time that you should spend not at practice. What are some sort of general tips you have about how to make best use of that time off the pool deck?
Well, I think that you have to know how to schedule yourself, and you have to understand what your obligations are for each day, and move forward from there. One of the things that I was struggling with today was that, for example, I had a lot of things that were fluid going into the day, and as they solidified from yesterday at about noon until about an hour ago, I was moving some pieces around on the chessboard to figure out, okay, how is this going to work? So 6 minutes from now, I'm going to be on a virtual interview, with a job candidate.
Okay.
An hour and a half after that interview starts, I've got a working group meeting with USA Swimming about electronic timing systems. At the end of that, 15 minutes later, my office coworker and I are going to go, and we're going to go under our pool and figure out a bunch of stuff down there about where we need to store some things. And then I know that an hour after that, I'm getting in my car and I'm going home because I am not going to be here longer than I have to be. And I plan my day. And if you let yourself get distracted and you start moving the pieces around without any idea of where they're going, that's when you run into trouble, in my opinion. At least that's something that works for me.
Yeah.
One of the things that I read recently that I thought was really smart was start with the end of the day in mind and work backwards. And I think a lot of swim coaches can relate to that, because I think some of the better coaches I've seen tend to look at the end of their season and they work backwards to figure out what they want to do, and they plan their phasing of their practice strategy or whatever it is. You do the same thing with your day or your week or whatever. And, thinking about it in terms of making sure you get those things done, those core things that you need to get done. And if you have some free time in there, hey, that's awesome. You can take a walk or get a quick workout in, or surf Amazon for whatever it is you want, or look at those meet results that we were talking about. But you always know that you have obligations and you know where those obligations lie. And I think if people would just be a little more cognizant of that. And there are so many tools that you can use this, whether it's a day planner, if you like to write, or Outlook, if you like doing that, or Google or whatever. Everybody's got something. Find something that works for you and stick with it. Have some discipline and just keep working on it, because again, it's a skill like anything else. For some people, it comes naturally. For others, they got to work at it a little bit. But in the end, it's something that I think can have a really positive impact on how you interact with people and how well you can do your job.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would add too, I think, something that we talked in the beginning about pandemic stuff, there's probably a lot of places where maybe, they haven't had coaches all together in the same space when they're off the pool deck. I know that's been something that's been a little bit different for us over the last year, but just even knowing that some of that organization, it allows you to work with other people much better, because when they're going to be there, when you're going to be able to interact with them, when you're going to be able to have that sort of face-to-face stuff that would be easier than, sort of randomly calling somebody else on the phone, talking about, for instance, the meet entries for the meet that's coming up, troubleshooting things here and there. So just even having that consistency when you know what to expect from other people and you know what to expect from yourself, and that there's sort of fairly fixed beginning and ending points to some of that stuff. I couldn't agree more. I think that was probably when I was away from a structured coaching environment and I was in business for myself, that was the hardest thing, was structuring my day and making beginning and ending points for things. Because I just thought, well, I could just work on this all the time. And then I would get really, really sort of exhausted. And then I go, I need to take a step away from this, instead of just sort of like having it organized and planned out.
And for the record, I wasn't kidding about these 6 minutes from now when I said that. It literally in 30 seconds.
2 minutes.
I'm on a different call, so I'm going to have to get here pretty quick.
Yep. All right. Great, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. I think we've got plenty more to discuss. This has been wonderful. This one will actually, in case you're tracking John and his calendar, this podcast is going to come out much longer after, not the same day. So, John Stalker, just don't take everything he says literally as happening today. Okay. Thank you to both of you. Thank you to everybody for listening. There'll be plenty more where that came from, and we'll talk to you again soon.